Hey guys, welcome to Mad Scientist Barbecue. I'm Jeremy Yoder, and today I'm going to be testing whether or not a barbecue competition secret is going to dial up the flavor in your backyard barbecue, or whether it's going to be, like a lot of competition barbecue, just too much to make a meal out of. One thing that I've seen among competition cooks is the use of things like beef broth and beef bouillon, and what we're testing today is whether beef bouillon powder is going to be a game changer into dialing up the flavor of your backyard barbecue, or is it going to be too much? This jar, only $5. If you can drastically improve the quality of your cooking for $5, I think it's worth it. Let's find out. I was introduced to this idea in probably 3 different ways. The first is Marco Pierre White did some YouTube videos a while back where he was using Knorr stock pots, which is basically a concentrated broth in order to season things rather than just salt. And I know that his restaurant, they used to do some crazy things to really dial up umami flavor. Like they would roast tons of chickens, not actually serve any of the chicken, but just get the liquid from the roasting process and use that in other dishes. The second thing that made me think of this is as I was formulating my own rubs, one thing that I noticed over and over again in competitor rubs that are out there. There are lots of great ones out there. I mean, Harry Sue's rub is really good. Meat Church makes some really good stuff. The Blues Hog guys make some good stuff. There are great rubs out there, but I noticed that there's a lot of crossover between the ingredients in a lot of rubs and beef bouillon or chicken bouillon. Basically, they're trying to mimic that umami flavor. And that in combination with what people have been doing in the competition world for a long time told me this is probably a good idea to test it out. And then the third and final place that I heard about doing this was from a friend of mine, Chris Stafford from Lone Mountain Barbecue. By the way, go check out his Instagram. If you love great images of barbecue, check him out. He's Lone Mountain Barbecue on Instagram. He told me he tried it and it was awesome. So I thought, well, now I have to try it. Not that I'm sad about it, but we're going to give it a shot. I'm going to cook 3 briskets. I'm going to do one with just salt and pepper as our baseline standard. The other, I'm going to do beef bouillon and pepper and just a little bit of salt because this actually doesn't have as much salt as a standard brisket rub would have. And then lastly, I'm going to use a standard brisket rub. Here is Fiesta, I guess it's Bullner's Fiesta, but brisket rub that you could buy at, any H-E-B in Texas. So something that would be widely available and something that would be a good comparison to give to the other 2 rubs that we're going to use, salt and pepper, and our secret weapon, beef bouillon. So I'm going to get those briskets out. I'm going to trim them all the same way. They're coming from the same case. They've been in the fridge the exact same amount of time. They're all similar in weight, plus or minus a pound or so. And I'm going to trim them, season them all, and then get them on the cooker. And ultimately, we got to see, how does this taste? But first, we're going to be able to see, does anything burn? How does the bark look? Is it evaporating water well? Is it rendering fat well? Does this affect the cooking process at all? We're going to answer all those questions, but first, got to trim and season some of these up. A couple details because I'll always get asked. This is Creekstone Choice. One of the reasons I'm using Creekstone Choice is because it's kind of a standard product that you could get all around the country, and so we have a good baseline, and I've cooked thousands of these in my lifetime, and so I have a good sense of how they're going to do. And then the second thing that we always get asked is what kind of wood. Today I'm using my favorite wood. I'm using pecan wood. I'm using it in the Solution Offset Smoker. If you're interested in that, we'll put a link in the description for the solution. But it's time to get this trimmed up and seasoned. Just another day in paradise. There's a big one here. Maybe we shouldn't use this one because it's bigger than the other ones. For the longest time, I didn't know why people from Texas would get upset when I said the old country Brazos. Because apparently in Texas, you pronounce the river Brazos. And I was like, okay. If any of you guys don't know, this is an expensive test. I don't know if you guys have seen the price of Creekstone Choice briskets recently, at least where I live. It is not cheap, but for the sake of science and for the sake of you viewers, we gotta answer this question. One of the best ways you can help me is by subscribing below, because that helps me make videos like this. It can help offset the cost of buying an entire case of brisket and cooking it all just for anyhow, just to see if beef bouillon powder is gonna be the secret to make food better. I'm always after the best food, and if you guys are too, hit the subscribe button. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you. Just wanted to update you guys. We had 4 briskets in the case. 3 were very similar in size and 1 was smaller. But one of those ones that was bigger just had a huge gash in it, and I didn't want to compare it to the other 2 that didn't have a huge gash. So we used one that's smaller. So what I'm gonna do to try to make it as fair as possible is I'm gonna use only salt and pepper on the small one. Then we're gonna do the brisket rub on one of the big ones, and we're gonna do the beef bouillon powder on one of the other big ones to try to make it as verified as possible between those 2. By the way, guys, this is pepper only right now. I'll add the salt in a minute. Salt and pepper going on. I bet this is gonna look really good on here. I really want to add some black pepper to this, but then the test wouldn't be the test anymore. I see it's got some like big chunks of black pepper, like it's cracked, but not kind of the even coating that I want on the outside of brisket. I think this probably, at least aesthetically to me, would look better with a good dose of black pepper on it. But that's not this test. Maybe another time. Alrighty then, here we go. My fear is if you go with straight bouillon, then you are going to get a lot of those umami flavors, but not quite enough salt to balance it. If you have too much MSG and not enough salt, it kind of dulls all the sensations, I think, on your tongue. That's purely anecdotal. I have no proof for that, but in my experience, that tends to happen. Downside for this beef bouillon powder, there's no shaker bottle, so I'm going to have to try to do this in a judicious way here. I think this is going to be one of the only times I've ever actually rubbed a rub. Pat rub. Salt, cornstarch, MSG, sugar, palm oil, onion extract, cooked beef powder, yeast extract, that's another way to dial up umami, disodium guanylate, disodium inosinate, natural flavor, garlic extract, spices, and turmeric for color. You know, if the turmeric was in there for color, that's fine, but if it's there for flavor, absolutely not. Now it's starting to look like a brisket. I probably used like a 1/4 cup in total of this beef bouillon powder on this brisket. A lot of it fell off, but it's probably a 1/4 cup down from where it started. Probably a cost of like $1 worth of beef bouillon. So if this is awesome, it's really going to be worth it. If it's not awesome, well then don't waste the $1. Let's get this thing on. Ever so slightly. Salt and pepper only. Fiesta brisket rub, beef bouillon powder, a little bit of kosher salt, diamond crystal specifically, and black pepper, 16 mesh. Let's get this fire going. One of the best parts of filming barbecue videos is that while you're attempting to film, your fire dies, which makes everything so awesome. Actually, because this is the beginning of the cook, I don't mind having a little bit of dirtier smoke as these logs catch. But to give you guys the game plan for this cook, I'm gonna go the first 2 hours at say 225 and really smoky, always an open flame in here, but really smoky. Then 250 for 2 hours, still nice and smoky. Then we're gonna dial it up probably 275 for the rest of this cook because this pit kind of cooks like bigger pits in terms of what the thermometer reads. 225 for 2 hours, nice and smoky. 250 for 2 hours, nice and smoky. Then we're gonna cruise 275 the rest of the way. We might make an adjustment when it gets close to time to wrap, depending on how the fat's rendering, but we'll keep you abreast of all of those changes. So we'll just check in probably 2 hours to see how the color's coming along, because that's gonna be our proxy for smoke flavor, and then ultimately the aesthetic when this brisket is finished. Oh, look at that. Cool thing about the solution is it allows you to keep a raging hot coal bed. So even though it had been sitting here kind of dying and burning out for 35, 40 minutes, I put these on, they caught right away. That's all good. Now I'm gonna get the damper and the door to the firebox set exactly how I want to keep 225 and smoky. Currently it looks like 190 on its way up to 200. And we're going to try to rein it in at 225. I think these settings, having used this pit so much, are going to get it nailed right at 225. We should have to not mess with the fire for maybe 40 minutes in between. But yeah, we'll update you. One of the things that people ask me about the solution offset, this is kind of a frequently asked question, I even made a little video about it, is smoke leaking from the door. They're like, oh, when I fire it up, I see smoke leaking. That's because the pit isn't quite drawing fully yet. Because what happens when the pit's really drawing well is that the hot gases that escape from the stack here actually create a low pressure right here next to the stack, which is going to pull the air in that way. So as this comes up to temperature, you're going to see all this smoke that's kind of leaking stop leaking. A super easy way to fix this is to get high temperature silicone and seal it all the way around. It's not going to affect the performance either way, whether you seal it or whether you don't. But just as an aesthetic thing, if you prefer not to see any smoke leaking ever, high temp silicone is the way to go. We've been rocking about 225 for a little over 2 hours now. Let's check in on these and see what differences we can see. All right, see some differences. Got salt and pepper only, brisket rub, and bouillon. Everything's still soft. These actually look pretty good. The one that looks the most different is the one that didn't have very much black pepper, which is the brisket rub. But they're all actually getting pretty dark, looking pretty good. And so I think we kick it up to 250 and let it rock for a couple hours more, and then maybe 275. We may or may not check in again right at the time of wrapping, but I'm pleased with this so far. They're all looking good. I finished those 3 briskets last night, and today, after they've had a nice long heated rest at about 140 degrees, it's time to slice into them and see how good they taste. And speaking of things that taste great, I want to tell you about one of my favorite sponsors of all time, Jocko Fuel. If you guys don't know what Jocko Fuel is, it is a sports nutrition company that makes the highest quality products. And I say that unreservedly. Everything that's on the label is transparent. There are no artificial flavors, preservatives, or colors. You can trust these as having the highest quality of ingredients and giving you the results that you really want. You might not know Jocko Fuel, but you probably know Jocko Willink, its founder. He is really the break glass in case of war type of guy, a former Navy SEAL. He does a lot of motivational stuff like discipline equals freedom. On the side of this box it says hard work, clean fuel, no excuses. It's just the kind of guy that he is. And so he has that same approach when it comes to creating these different sports supplements. The protein powder doesn't have any of the artificial stuff that would give me pause or give me stomach issues in some of the other products that are out there on the market. I'll give you one fact, and it should tell you 2 very important things. I let my 4-year-old daughter drink the Jocko protein. Why? Number one, it tastes so good that this 4-year-old will gladly drink it and request it. And the second thing it tells you is that I trust these ingredients so much that I would give them to my daughter. Sometimes I drink diet soda. There's a 0% chance I would let my daughter drink diet soda. But I trust all of these so much that I have 0 qualms about any of the ingredients. You can look at the label and know that everything in there is of good quality. The protein specifically has short digesting, medium digesting, and long digesting proteins, which means your muscles are going to be fueled over a long period of time. And then one of my absolute favorites, the Jocko Hydrate. This tastes delicious. I start every morning by drinking one of these and I feel immediately better. Then you have pre-workout, you have the protein, of course, you have ready to drink, you have protein powder. I use them both and I've been feeling great. I don't know if you guys know, but I've lost 14 pounds since switching to using Jocko Fuel. So for me, this has been an absolute game changer. It has my absolute highest recommendation for all of these products. I've given them to multiple people and the praise has been universal. I could not be any prouder to have them sponsor today's video. If you guys are interested, click on the link in the description. You will not be disappointed. You may find yourself waking up at 4:34 in the morning to do brutal workouts and then drink some Jocko Fuel to recover. Highly recommend it. You guys are gonna love it. All right, here we have salt and pepper only as our baseline, both in terms of appearance and flavor. This thing isn't lacking for bark. It looks really nice. It feels good. I think it's gonna be really tasty. The fat's rendered well. Really, really pleased with this. I'm gonna move this over to the side and we're gonna get our brisket rub next. Here we have the brisket rub. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but it's slightly lighter than the salt and pepper only. And it had a little bit of pooling right here, so it's also directly in sunlight. So if we move that, you can see just a shade lighter right there, but that's to be expected. It does look really nice. It feels really nice. Fat's rendered super well. And this is gonna be a great comparison because this brisket rub has paprika for color and it also has MSG for flavor. So it's gonna be a great comparison to the beef bouillon to see if this is really gonna make a difference or if it's the same kind of stuff you're finding in all your brisket rubs already. Let's find out. All right, here we have the beef bouillon. This is the darkest brisket. It smells the most like a roast or something. It looks really good, feels really good. Let's take some cuts off of each of these briskets and then compare them. We're gonna go salt and pepper, then brisket rub, and then finally the bouillon. I'm really curious to see how this turns out. It smells so good. Salt and pepper, here we go. Let's separate point and flat, and I'll take a slice from the flat. All right, salt and pepper only flat. Smells good, smells smoky, smells roasted. It kind of has that tangy flavor that you can get with smoke. Or it has that smell, rather. Let's try it. Salt and pepper is never going to get old for me, guys. Thoughts on salt and pepper? Looks great. Cook went well. Bark is great. Super flavorful. Lots of smoke. Simple, but just really enjoyable flavors. Let's try the brisket rub next. Okay, now we have this guy. Looks really good. Smells good. Nice and juicy, even for the flat. It does smell different. I think you can kind of pick up on like maybe onion, garlic in this that you couldn't really pick up on in the salt and pepper only because it was salt and pepper only. Let's taste it though, because that's what really matters. This is a good looking bite. It's really good. Brisket rub. Definitely saltier than the 50-50 salt and pepper mix that we used on the first brisket. The flavor's really nice, but it's kind of muddled in with the beef and the smoke. The smoke isn't right at the forefront. And maybe there are too many things going on that, you know, just the main actors kind of get lost. It's still very, very good. It's just not what I think of when I think of how a brisket should be in my head. But we got one more to try and we're gonna compare it to this. Let's see. Smells really good. We're about to see if it's tasting really good. Spices. All right, here we go. Right from the edge. This is what I'm gonna be tasting right here, guys. Nice smoke ring. Didn't inhibit smoke ring formation because this has a big, thick smoke ring on it. Why is this so good? That's unbelievable. All right, this beef bouillon powder brisket definitely tastes different than the other two. And for my money, it's probably the most flavorful. So in the past, I've used seasoned salt in addition to salt and pepper to really dial up the flavor of the brisket that I'm cooking. Basically, if I'm cooking for me, I use salt and pepper only. If I'm cooking for somebody else, I'll use salt, pepper, and seasoned salt. And I think this could actually replace that seasoned salt because I think it does that job maybe even a little better. And here's the other thing. It's $5. It's dirt cheap. So the next time I'm cooking brisket, I'll probably do salt and pepper plus some of this beef bouillon powder. It's just so savory. So I can tell you that the flavor we put on this brisket is really, really good. But I think it might be 2% too much. And I used a lot of the bouillon powder. I think if we dialed it back just a little bit and use that as a flavor enhancer, as like, okay, we're gonna dial the umami all the way up, then yeah, I would sprinkle a little bit of that on the brisket or ribs or chicken or whatever you happen to be cooking. I think Marco Pierre White was onto something when he was using those stock pots to season things. This is super, super good, but to get that perfectly clean flavor along with that umami, I think I would go a base layer of salt and pepper, basically the way you would want to do it anyway, and then sprinkle a little bit of the bouillon powder over the top. You're gonna spend 30, 40 cents worth of bouillon powder, I think, and it's just really gonna make all the flavors pop without it being so complex that the main actors aren't really present. Because in the brisket rub, I want to taste beef, I want to taste smoke, I want to taste salt and pepper. And what happened was I tasted like beef in the background somewhere, and there was smoke in the background somewhere too. Then I tasted all the seasonings that were in the brisket rub, which were very good, but that's not why I'm doing barbecue. I'm doing barbecue because I want to taste the meat and I want to taste the smoke. With the bouillon powder, I could still taste the meat and taste the smoke, but it was competing a little bit too much. If I dial it back, I think you could have something that's just right. So I think this is one of those rare lessons where like those competition guys, they know what's up. This is something we can integrate into the backyard cooking style. A lot of times people who are cooking in their backyards will do full competition style stuff and they'll become disenchanted because it's not really something you can make a meal out of. And then a lot of other times people will think I have to do it exactly the way a restaurant does. But I think the perfect place for a backyard cook is to maybe be somewhere in between how a restaurant cooks and how a competition barbecue cook does their thing, because then you can draw from both and give you exactly what you want to cook low volume in your backyard and make it exactly what you want, because restaurants often have to do things out of convenience and competition cooks have to dial things up way too much because it's one bite rather than a whole meal. You can borrow from both and make something that's even more spectacular in your own backyard and start feeding your friends and family, and I think they're going to appreciate it. So if you're willing to spend the $5, by the way, I have no relationship to beef bouillon powder of any kind, but I would recommend definitely trying it. I think you can really dial up flavor on almost any barbecue item that you cook. So good luck cooking out there. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button. You can also subscribe to the channel. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, X, and Patreon at Mad Scientist Barbecue. By the way, on Patreon, if you sign up right now, we're giving away free Amish cookbooks. So a lot of cool things we're doing over there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Really quick, I got to jump in. We've actually already finished filming, but my wife keeps going back and nibbling at the beef bouillon brisket. You've heard of the bend test for brisket, but really the one that matters most to me is probably the wife test. The one that she goes back to and keeps nibbling on is probably the one that I want to keep making in the future.